A tribute to the camel, or my trip to Israel. I actually don't know where to begin this story, except for that I just went to Israel for the first time, and it was amazing! I traveled with a group of 40 people for 2 weeks. This is pretty much how I looked the entire time. And this trip was a Birthright Israel program, a free trip one receives for being Jewish. And I have my dad to thank for those roots. Thank you, Dad. 40 people is a large group of people, and 2 weeks is a long time for us to all be together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Luckily, we had our armed guard with us and our two group leaders who were from Canada and just happened to be madly in love. We also got the luck of having the best tour guide in the country, an extremely unbiased man, particularly unique. But before I left on the trip, my friend called me and she said, "Jacqueline, I think you might be the weirdest person on this trip. You're just gonna be different than everyone else." And I thought, well, maybe it won't be fun. Maybe I won't be included. Maybe this won't be such a great adventure. I was prepared for it to be whatever it would be. But you know what? It just so happened that this was all about connecting. This was all about bonding. The whole trip consisted of us becoming extremely close, a 40-person family. Well, not that close, seeming that it was so hot in Israel.
So hot.
The desert, summertime, the sun constantly scorching you. You're sweating, you're walking around, you're learning about history and politics. Here's a group of us after we climbed Masada, baked by the sun. The heat had made us lose our minds. The trip turned to this kind of sticky insanity, constant sleepiness. We were set to find ways to wake up and enjoy ourselves even when we were exhausted. We did a pretty good job at this, really. And you know what? We learned how to deal with the sun. And we learned how to have fun in moments when most people would be begging for rest. We did fashion shows. We exposed ourselves to one another. Things got hot. People really started to fall in love. Love in many forms, all shapes and sizes. People even fell in love with dogs. Someone even got married. We leaned on lots of holy architecture. We met French Boy Scouts in places where Jesus had been. We scoped out the most amazing insects, and I got really jazzed about all of the flora and fauna. I explained how some of these plants were familiar to me, and I told people about eucalyptus trees and how you can roll the leaf up for a good scent. Mel Gibson was also on the trip with us. It's a good thing that people were ready to take photographs because really we were all somewhat stuck on taking our picture in front of the same exact sign the whole trip, and this one dinosaur. We also saw lots of clowns in Israel, which was something we weren't prepared for. They seemed to follow us. We looked at street art. We swam in the lovely Mediterranean Sea. We got muddy at the Dead Sea. We went on a river rafting trip on the Jordan, and I got pulled into a pirate's boat, for real. We stayed at a kibbutz. We went to every market you can possibly imagine. We learned about how people used to sustain themselves in the desert. I was, of course, obsessed with this entire process. And really, we got to go everywhere one could possibly imagine in a country the size of New Jersey. We traveled north to south, east to west, all up and down the coast. We went to all of the religious and historical sites. We discussed agriculture in the desert, how cities were formed on top of sand dunes, how people decided that this would be the place to secure independence, to secure a state for the Jewish people. And the nationalism there is strong. Israel is full of this feeling of celebration and constant struggle. Beauty and craftsmanship mixed with borders and a hint of extreme dissatisfaction. There were protests going on in all of the major cities while we were there over the economic state of Israel, how people weren't making enough wages to pay their rent. And I had to go to Palestine on my own, visit the West Bank because it wasn't part of the program, and yet I knew it was part of understanding this complicated place as a whole. So all we could really do was walk around, take note of what we saw, ask as many questions as possible. We had some Israeli soldiers travel with us, and that was really enlightening because they had a completely different perspective on the entire issue. They told us about their friends who had died. We went to cemeteries. We went to places where battles had been fought. We went to places where history was speaking to us in a way that couldn't be ignored. It's much different than seeing it all on the news, and really it provided me with a lot to think about, as well as an outlet for constant discussion. And food. constant food. I would say that eating was one of the main ways we made our way through the country. Israel is full of any delectable treat one could dream of, and we were shoving food in our mouths. We were buying bags of candy, eating things at every turn. Our entire day was always revolving around what we were going to eat next, which was perfect. And I think I walked away from the trip with friends I'll have for the rest of my life. And at the same time, we got in touch with parts of our heritage that we hadn't seen since childhood, pieces of our past. Not to mention building a wonderful present moment that was full of ridiculous celebration and really showed me a lot about group dynamic. I certainly made my mark on the dance floor to show my appreciation for such a group of people. But the truth is that this video is actually about camels. That's right, the camel, one of the most amazing creatures I have ever seen in my life, which I first encountered in Israel. We were on the bus, heading toward the Bedouin tents in the desert, and we had been together for about 4 days at this point. 4 days of no alone time for me, so I was feeling pretty emotionally on edge. And then there it was, the oasis ahead of us and the camels. When I first set eyes on them, I immediately started weeping. I had never seen such a thing in my life, and I was crying real tears. And my bus partner, John, was like, "Dude, why are you crying? What's going on?" And I just said, "Look at them. Look at how incredible they are." And I was totally taken. We all got out of the bus and started picking out the camels we would ride, and everyone was so enthused and so excited, and this was their first moment in the desert, and it seemed really easy for them. They just picked their camel riding partners and got right on. They were laughing and playing, and then there was me. There I was, riding my camel, crying the entire time we rode. Oh, yep, there I am again, crying. It was unbelievable. I couldn't stop. I was not just sort of crying. I was weeping the whole trip. But the camel, it just blew my mind. This perfect creature created for the desert, absolutely specified for this land. And I couldn't get over their feet. I was just looking at their feet the whole time we were moving and the way they touched the ground and their perfect rumps and their perfect little eyes and their sweet, sweet look, and the backs of their heads were so soft, and their ears, and I got to touch them. I got to touch the camel while we were riding, and I thought, this is what we do to them. This is what humans do. We pull them around on the ropes, we put their little harnesses on them, and they had cuts on their faces. And this is how we respond to their majesty. We put tourists on top of them and ride them around in the desert all day. We pay no form of respect. We all are just riding them around like it's so fun, and we're just riding them through the desert. And for some reason, I cannot let go. I am ultimately mesmerized and moved by the whole of this experience. And I start thinking about my friend back in the States who has some camel teeth. He got them when he was in the Middle East, and I think, you know what? I want some camel teeth. And suddenly I'm fixated on this little idea. We go back and have some tea, and we're hanging out and having dinner, but all I'm thinking about are camel's teeth. And this man, there he is, on the right there in the red scarf. He was there when I got off the camel. His eyes, the color of the Mediterranean. I think about him. I see him walking around. There he is again, all the way on the right there with the red scarf, and I think, I bet he can show me to the camel teeth. I'm sure he knows where they are. So I walk out into the night, I leave the camp, and I decide I cannot play this game of cards that everyone is involved in. I cannot sit around and join the drum circle, because all I can think about is how I can get a camel tooth in my hand, successfully return to the United States with such a tooth. So I set out to find him, and sure enough, I do, right away. I cross back to where we were eating dinner, and he's there, and he says, "Yeah, I know where you can get a camel tooth." And then I just walk with him into the night, into the desert night, and he says, "Right across that ridge, 5:30 in the morning, I bet you'll find a tooth." And then he starts telling me about his permaculture farm. the 100 people he moved into the desert with to create a community, and I am salivating. This beautiful man is standing in front of me telling me about everything that I love in the whole world, and I'm suddenly sold. I'm going to move to the desert. I can just see our house and what it will look like. I can just imagine our perfect community and how we'll join together to create such greatness in the desert, how we'll all just be so connected and it will be wonderfully perfect and happily ever after. I can even see all the food that will grow. I can taste the lettuce, and it's so good. Now I'm herding camels. I'm leading them through the desert, and then I remember, wait a minute, I already have a job that I really like. And I snap to my senses because I think to ask this one specific question. Do you have a family? He says, oh yes, I have 4 children. 4 of them. They're beautiful. I love them. And so I'm relieved I am free from this idea because, I mean, I love children, but a family would probably kill me at this point in my life. And then suddenly everything's hysterical. I'm just almost laughing. And I remember I love the trees. I don't want to live in the desert. I have a beautiful home in the forests of Northern California. Besides, I'm happy being someone's crazy aunt, and I already have a perfect family of my own. But then as we're leaving, we're parting, we're embracing, he says, you have a really good smell. This, of course, kills me, and I'm almost sent back into my reverie of becoming a camel herder, some weird freak living in the deserts of Israel with this man I don't even know. But I realize I'm satisfied, and I go to bed, because I know in the morning I have to wake up, and I know I'm going to take John with me. The camel guy said I had to take someone with me, and I know it's going to be John, because John will wake up at 5:30 in the morning and cross the desert road into the unknown. Oh yeah, he'll follow that ridge in the darkness that this man showed me because he's like that. And sure enough, there I am out there on the ridge with John, and we find a dead camel. And I use a desert rock to bust its teeth out of its jaws before we return to the camp, just to make it in time for breakfast, and I have the treasure that I was seeking. I have part of a camel that lived in Israel, part of a beautiful creature that chewed and ate and thought and felt, and I am so happy because the camel was important to me before I ever went to Israel. The camel has been a symbol. Humans have ways of connecting themselves to animals. I've even felt the link between myself and my friend's dog. But these connections, this is where the story takes its big turn. Because once I was sitting with my friend Ariel Lanuski, my best friend, and we were looking at my journals from when I was in first grade, and she said, you know, you drew a lot of camels. It seems like the camel was really important to you when you were just a kid. And I look at the journals, and sure enough, it's true. There's all these different camel drawings. And she says, yeah, well, did you think about the connection? You draw a lot of things like that now. You draw a lot of things that look like camels. She spotted the similar shapes in the humpbacks, the indistinguishable stances of each being drawn then and drawn now. It became clear that the camel is a creature I'd forgotten as one of my chosen symbols. It wasn't until Ariel pointed out the connection between the beasts that I draw now and those that I penciled out during childhood that I realized the depth involved. I went home and I thought all about it. I wrote on the subject and a vision came to me. I started to understand what the camel might mean. I gave it definition in my always expanding mythology. The vision was an outline of a camel standing above the letters RE, adjacent to an infinity symbol. What I came up with was that the camel is a symbol for all of the lessons that I must relearn throughout life, all of the ways that I must readapt, be reaffirmed, get reacquainted, reconnect. The RE goes on, and the idea basically comes down to karma, challenges that we must face again and again in one lifetime, the lessons that we have the hardest time learning completely and responding to in full. Our lives are a beautiful timeline of revisiting these lessons and issues so that we might know better what to do next, or at least learn to feel familiar and safe in the process of understanding. My drawings as a child have transformed somewhat, the form being almost the same, and yet the reason for drawing now seems named, purposeful in that I see the camel as a signal for what I carry with me, my key elements that keep circling back to teach me more and more. Thus, I'm reminded of Professor Ginny Grimsley's train analogy, which described the idea of karma to me in college. Ginny said that there will be some lessons in life that repeat themselves, that will appear as a train looping on the same track again and again. The first few times the issue comes around, we notice the train and experience it differently with each arrival. After a while, we look carefully at the pattern painted on the caboose and note it is identical to the last train we spotted on the track. After a few more times around, we catch on. We now see that this is the exact same train and that we are dealing with the exact same issue. But just because this realization occurs, we don't get to stop the process. The train will persist by revisiting us for years and years to come, in the form of different situations, but always in the same shape and style. Here is where it gets tricky. We either learn to love the train, know its every nut, bolt, and sound, decorate it and thank it for its teachings, or we hate it with every ounce of our being. If we choose the route of love, the train will keep on coming around, but we will know how to greet it, see it coming, fear it not. If, however, we choose the way of hate, the train may learn to hate us in return, start coming faster and with more strength, making the repetition something worth agonizing over, as it will not cease or even relent. My moment with the camel drawings brought me back to this idea of the train, and when I spoke about it with my dear friend Krishnamali on the phone, he reminded me of the word karma, which I hadn't thought of in a while. I saw my train with a camel sitting on top, the letters RE inscribed somewhere appropriate in a neat font. The point is clear to me now. We are to respect the glorious repetition that is life, and do our best not to roll our eyes or flounder in aversion when we arrive upon the same old mistakes that we keep making. These blunders or upsets are our tokens, our guides, and it is in fact our duty to review them with varying types of care and passion so that they might continue to present new forms of enlightenment with each rerun on the path. I could apply this to Israel. I could apply this to many things. Instead, I will end with thanks for the camel, all that it is, all that it represents, all that I could ever make of it, and then some. For it is my revived symbol, my teacher, a link that has led me to so much.